Boa noite, pessoal. Meu nome é Maria Carolina Moreira. Eu sou a atual presidente da Liga de Mercado Financeiro aqui da UFSCar de Sorocaba. Antes da gente começar o nosso evento, eu gostaria de agradecer a presença de todo mundo que está aqui com a gente hoje. Eu vou passar alguns recadinhos ainda em português antes da gente começar o evento. O primeiro deles é que o evento ele vai ser transmitido totalmente em inglês, mas que a Liga de Mercado Financeiro vai disponibilizar uma tradução do vídeo a posteriori no nosso canal no YouTube. Além disso, a gente vai estar disponibilizando certificados de horas complementares, então se você é estudante, você precisa do certificado. O link para preencher o formulário ele vai estar disponível na descrição do vídeo, na segunda metade do evento de hoje. E por fim, o último recado importante é que as inscrições para o nosso processo seletivo estão abertas e elas vão até o dia 2 de agosto, tá? Então, se você é da UFSCar de Sorocaba e ainda não se inscreveu, ainda dá tempo. Tá bom? A gente vai começar o evento agora. Dúvidas e perguntas podem ficar à vontade para mandar para a gente durante o evento. All right. Good evening, everyone. My name is Maria. I am in my bedroom. You can see in my background, I am light brown. I have light brown hair. I'm wearing a dark shirt. And here with me, I have Karen, who is also hosting this talk tonight.
Hello, everyone. My name is Karen. I have dark hair, dark eyes. I am a white woman, and I'm wearing an orange shirt with a black coat.
All right. We're both members of the Financial Market League of UFSCar Sorocaba. Tonight is the last day of Plurall, our event that talks about diversity. We will be talking tonight about trans visibility. It is a very interesting topic. We have a very special guest with us tonight, who is a managing director of corporate communications at Goldman Sachs. So we would like to thank Maeve Diwali for being here with us tonight. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for being here, Maeve. As Maria said, today we're here to talk about trans visibility. But before we get into before we get into this, we would love to hear a little bit more about your career and your professional background. We are all college students who are still deciding on what we're going to work, what is our dream jobs. So for us, it's really nice to hear about your path and what you have already experienced. So, what did you study in college, and how did you end up being a managing director at Goldman Sachs?
Okay. Should I talk about my appearance first? I have dirty blonde hair. I'm wearing a red blouse and a black jacket. Um, Again, thank you very much for having me, and I'm happy to talk about anything you'd like today. Um, I was born. I lived most of my life in the United States, but I was born in Ireland and came to the United States when I was young. I also spent most of my 20s in Japan, first as an exchange student, and then I worked in Japan. My educational background was I went to public schools in the United States, and then I went to a 4-year college and got my undergraduate degree in English. So one point I'd make is that for jobs in the financial services sector, um, people have a lot of different backgrounds. Some jobs require strong mathematical skills. Some jobs require strong science skills, but a lot of jobs in the financial services sector, it's good just to have a very broad background. And I studied English, history, uh, literature, things like that. And you don't have to study. I don't recommend studying financial matters in college. I think you should get a broad background. And then if you do want to go into financial services, then you can begin to specialize.
Right, perfect. Can you tell us a little bit more about the work environment where you work today and what you do exactly in corporate communications?
Sure. I work in the New York headquarters of Goldman Sachs. We in their New York office, we have about a quarter of our employees, about 10,000 people, and we in a big high-rise tower in New York City. Um, Incidentally, we have a large Brazilian operation as well. We have about 300 or 400 people working in Sao Paulo, and I visited our Sao Paulo office several times. My job is to have relationships with reporters who want to write about Goldman Sachs. So I spend my day learning everything I can about what's going on at Goldman Sachs and then talking to reporters who want to write about Goldman Sachs. And sometimes we'll do interviews with people here. Sometimes we'll decide not to comment. Sometimes we'll give reporters information, but it's my job to have those relationships with the reporters and and try to get them to write nice things about Goldman Sachs.
Very nice. And still in this topic, uh, if some of us, for example, wish to be an intern of yours, what is something that you look for when you're hiring an intern? Is there any specific skills that you would like to see, or something that we can develop to try and be our best versions when applying?
Right. I got hired at Goldman Sachs when I was older. I got hired when I was 40 years old, but it's very different now for the interns. I just had lunch with one of the interns, and it's really hard to become an intern at Goldman Sachs because it's just so competitive. There are tens of thousands of people who want this job, so people begin preparing for the job in high school. They make sure they get volunteer work. They try to get jobs in, part-time jobs in finance. And they try to get a very strong resume with a lot of different types of jobs just so they can become an intern at Goldman Sachs. And then if you are able to become an intern and you do very well here, then you're likely to be offered a job. So it's very prestigious to be an intern here, and it's important to have a lot of different experiences on your resume. So I would advise people, if you have a particular interest in something, to just pursue that interest and do it really well. And we value diverse experiences. So have diverse experiences, work hard, do volunteer work, and if you do all those things and get a good resume, you'll have a chance at being an intern here.
Right, perfect. As you know, we're here tonight to talk about trans visibility, so we're going to start to dive into the topic a little bit more. We're very excited today to hear more about your story, the challenge that you may have faced, and the achievements you have as well. So for starters, can you please describe your coming out journey for us? How did you feel during that process? How did that happen?
Sure. My story is a little bit different than a lot of transgender people because for most of my life, I don't think I knew I was transgender. I knew there were some things that I felt were wrong in my life, but I didn't know why they were wrong. And I had a sudden realization 3 years ago that I was transgender. And it was very, very shocking for me because all of my life I had thought I was a man. I thought I was a man that did not like myself. I thought I was a man that did not like anything masculine about myself, but I did not think I was transgender. And then when I realized I was transgender 3 years ago, a lot of things in my life began to make sense. And because I had waited so long to find out I was transgender, once I did, I really wanted to come out really quickly. I came out immediately in my social life, but for some reason, I was not comfortable coming out at work. So there was a period of about 7 or 8 months where I was out in my private life, but I was not out in my work life. And what I would do was I would come to work in a suit, dressed as a man, and then when the day was over, I'd go to the bathroom and I'd change into women's clothing, and then I would go out. I was, in essence, leading a double life. And this was, at the start, very exciting for me. But after a period of time, I grew very tired of it. I grew tired of dressing as a man and pretending I was a man. So in March of 2019, my company, Goldman Sachs, held a panel discussion here at our offices for Goldman Sachs employees in which we discussed how to make workplaces more comfortable for transgender people. And I attended that event. And after that event, I decided I wanted to come out at Goldman Sachs. And I reached out to our human resources department and we came up with a plan. And 2 months later, in May of 2019, I came out at work. And I've been very, very happy ever since.
Thank you so much for sharing this with us and talking a little bit more about your experience in the office after coming out. We're very curious to know what it was like in the office afterwards. We know that, as you just said, Goldman Sachs is a bank that has diversity as a main priority. So I was wondering, what was it like for you afterwards? How was the support that the bank gave you? And how was overall this experience for you?
Right. So I do honestly think that my company values diversity, and we value diversity for several reasons. One, the it's the market for human talent is very competitive, right? And so if you have a workplace that's very welcoming to different types of minority and marginalized groups, then you're going to attract talent. And if you create a workplace that values diversity and it's very welcoming for diverse people, people are going to perform better. They're going to feel more comfortable in the workplace. They're going to feel more comfortable around their colleagues, and they're going to perform better. So Goldman Sachs welcomes diversity, but we welcome diversity because it's good for our business, quite frankly. And the interesting thing is that the interesting experience that I had once I came out was that I've been at Goldman Sachs for 17 years. So I have a lot of relationships with people that I've had for a really long time. But when I came out, I was able to connect with my coworkers in a way that, on an emotional level, in a way that I hadn't been able to before. And this surprised me. And I think people just identified with my experience of coming out. Because if you think about it, um, finding out who you are and trying to live as who you are is not just a transgender experience. It's an experience that all humans have. Everybody wants to find out who they are, and everybody wants to live more as who they are. So I think people identified with that. And I definitely formed an emotional connection with some of my coworkers that I hadn't had before. And this has enriched my relationships at work. In terms of me, um, I'm a lot happier than I was before I realized I was transgender and I came out at work. So I think I'm a better coworker. I'm more approachable. I'm more friendly. I'm more collegial, and I try to help other people in the office probably more than I did. So it's just been genuinely a great experience for me.
That's great. And for those who don't really know Goldman Sachs and the bank's initiatives, can you tell us more about the bank's affinity network initiatives, and if by chance you do take part in any of them?
Sure. So we have, and most banks are like this, and most big U.S. corporations are like this. We have affinity networks. So there's a women's network, a Black network, a Hispanic network, an Asian network, and an LGBTQ plus network. I actually previously was part of the Asian professional network, not because I'm Asian, but I worked in Japan. You don't have to be you don't actually have to be a member of the group to be part of the group. I happened to live in Japan for 10 years, so I had an affinity for Asian people, and I was a part of that group. But once I came out, I really wanted to be part of our LGBTQ plus affinity network, and I'm actually co-lead of the community development part of our network, and that is the part of our network that has relationships with different LGBTQ plus institutions. So these could be charities that help LGBTQ plus people. It could be LGBTQ plus centers in cities where we do business, and we definitely have some. We have all those we have all those networks in our Brazil office as well, and they're very active. They're very important. There's a lot of work. I spend a lot of time on that network, and I don't know if you have Pride Month in Brazil like we have here, but last month was Pride Month in the US, and during Pride Month, our network holds many different events. I actually chaired an event. I interviewed a transgender author, and we've begun to go back to, in the United States, we've begun to go back to live events. That was a live event, but most of them were Zoom. But we hold events that people in the network would find interesting about topics, transgender issues in the workplace, and other topics that would be of interest to the network. But our affinity networks are very active, and people take them very seriously and spend a lot of time on them.
That's really great. We'd heard before about those affinity groups, but I wasn't aware of how big it really is.
Yeah.
And before coming into this event, we obviously did a little research on you. I wasn't aware that you were fluent in Japanese, which is really nice. But we did came across a New York Times article that was written about you, which we all really liked and thought it was very well written. But I'm interested to know, how did that article came about? Did you reach out to them? Did they reach out to you? And what it was like for you, for like from the beginning, you already had your story so public, and how did that felt?
Yeah. So remember that, remember what my job is. I'm in corporate communications here. So I spend my day dealing with reporters, right? And in big corporations, if you're transgender and you decide to come out, you usually work with the human resources department, and there's a number of things you have to do before you come out. And it's different than if a gay or lesbian person comes out, because usually, if we come out suddenly, our appearance is going to change, our name's going to change, and a lot of things about us are going to change. So we have to do some work. And one of the things that you typically do before you come out is, it's a nice idea to tell people who you deal with regularly in advance if you're coming out. And so we drew up lists of people both in Goldman Sachs and outside of Goldman Sachs that I deal with, that we decided to tell beforehand that I was transgender, and on this day in May 2 years ago I was going to come out. We did know that we felt like we had to tell reporters, because my name and appearance was going to change. And we did know that a reporter might find the story interesting and want to do a story. And indeed, the New York Times wanted to do a story. So we did not approach the New York Times. The New York Times came to us, and then we decided to cooperate. In my profession, corporate communications, we try to operate behind the scenes, and we try not to be part of the story. Usually, if we become part of the story, it's very bad. It means we messed up our job. But this was different, and up until that point, I knew many reporters, and I'd worked on many stories, but I had never been the story before. So this was a very unique experience for me, and I was a little bit nervous, but the New York Times did a very, very nice story. Not all media can do a very sensitive job covering transgender issues, but the New York Times did a very, very nice job. And as a result of that story, I've had many, many transgender people in corporate America, and actually not just America, actually from around the world, reach out to me and ask me for advice. They wanted to compare their situation to mine and ask for advice. I'm thinking of coming out. What should I do? Or I'm worried about coming out. What do you think about this? What do you think about that? And as a result of that story and subsequent stories that happened and speaking engagements that I got invited to do, I've had a lot of transgender people contact me and ask me for advice. So that story has allowed me to help a lot of people. So I've just found something new that gives my life additional meaning. I'm able to help other transgender people who aren't really as comfortable with who they are as I am. So it's been a very rewarding experience. And that's why I usually accept a lot of invitations to speak or do interviews.
Great. That was actually a question we had for you, so thank you for answering that. As you know, our audience is mostly made by younger people, those people that are now looking for internships, looking for their dream jobs, looking for an opportunity to actually start their career. So this question is, what advice would you give as a transgender woman for someone who is also part of the LGBTQ community when looking for a company to start their career? what would you recommend them to look for before applying or before actually taking the offer?
Yeah, unfortunately, there's no one size fits all. And I have to say, I'm very privileged because I'm white. I work for Goldman Sachs, which is a very forward-thinking company, and I happen to live. I actually live in a part of New York City where just a lot of LGBTQ people live. I live in one of the best places in the world to be transgender. So it's actually very easy for me to be out here. And there are a lot of places in the United States where it's not easy for people to be out. And there are many places around I'm sure, in Brazil's big cities, it's easier. In Sao Paulo or Rio, it's easier to be out and transgender than it is in some of the rural countryside. So it really depends. But what I would say is if you are transgender and you don't know what to do, there's people like me who are willing to help you. And, a lot of places have LGBTQ centers where you can get information, you can find people to talk to. You can reach out to people like me and other transgender people who are out already on social media. And we realize how difficult some of these issues can be. And most of us really want to help. So ask for help, ask for advice from the people who've already done this, and will help. But it's very complex when you first realize you're transgender, and really the first thing that you have to do when you realize you're transgender for the first time is you really need to talk to a a therapist or a professional who can help you navigate all the things that you have to navigate. There's physical change, there's emotional change, mental change. It's very, very complex, and sometimes it's difficult to come to terms with all these complex matters in a short period of time.
Yeah, that makes sense. And we know that representation matters, like to have someone to reach out to ask. How do you think that representation can be increased in the corporate world? Like, do you think that the companies have an active role in that? How do you see that situation?
Um, yeah, companies can have an active role. Fortunately, in the US, we now have a president who's very trans supportive, but our previous president on transgender issues, he was horrible. He really was bad. And I think your current president has some issues with transgender people as well, from what I hear. And I think it's important if the political climate's not good, that companies speak up. And our company has spoken up in the past. Our company's been very supportive of, for example, gay marriage. We've spoken publicly before gay marriage was passed at the national level. And last year in the United States, we had a lot of protests by Black people about police brutality, and our company spoke up about that. We've had attacks because of the perception that the COVID started in China. There was a lot of attacks in the past year on Asian people here in the United States, and our company spoke up about that. So I think big companies that are very, very influential have diverse employee populations. It's important for them to speak up, and companies are very important and influential, and sometimes politicians listen. So yes, companies can help change things.
Yes, and also talking about ways to create safer environment for transgender people. How do you think the cisgender audience who's listening to us right now, how do you think they can be allies and how they can help to create a safer environment for the LGBTQ plus community and to people who don't feel comfortable at work right now, how they can help?
Yes, that's a great question. And, just remember, there's always a lot more allies than there are transgender people. So allies can be very, very important in making the workplace a better and safer place, the workplace or the school place safer for and better for transgender people. And I just always encourage allies to, if they don't understand something, just to ask me. And if somebody asks me something out of kindness, I'm always going to help. And so that's one thing I'd say to allies. And then the other thing that's really important about allies is, because there's so many more allies than there are like actual transgender people, there's a good chance that um, allies might know, like allies might know a transgender person who is very confident, and they might know a transgender person who's not so confident and need help. And I've had situations where allies have been able to bring people like me who can help people to help people who need help. So like allies can play that important role of kind of matching up people who can help with people who need help.
Okay, that makes sense. Despite the projects that you have been working with the bank, do you have any other personal projects outside the bank that you have been working on that you would like to share with us today?
I have, well, number one, I have my whole network of transgender people that I talk to and mentor, and some of them have reached out to me because I work at Goldman Sachs, but that's something I do outside of work. And then I've also written a memoir about my experience. I'm trying to get it published, but I haven't got it published yet. But there's a lot of memoirs out there written by transgender people in the U.S. But maybe because I came out of Goldman Sachs, maybe mine will be interesting. I hope.
Yeah, we heard about a book coming out. We are very excited. Do you already, by any chance, have somewhat a date that you can share with us, or how long
I
you will
haven't,
wait?
I haven't sold it yet, so I don't have a date yet. Hopefully soon.
All right. Um. So, to the next question. We know that when your whole coming out journey happened, you were in your midlife. You already been at the bank for a while. Um, you already knew people in there. But to young people who are still applying for jobs, who are in the beginning of their career, do you have any advice on how they can be brave to embrace their true selves? We see a lot of people questioning if they should go to interviews with clothes that they don't feel comfortable in, just so they can try and impress the other people. So, do you have any advice to those people who are listening to
Yeah,
us?
that's a great question. And um, I also talk to a lot of students at colleges who are probably already out at college, and they don't know what to do when they interview for a job in corporate America. Some think it might be better to go back in the closet, and they're not really sure what to do. And I had a question about this because I had I had already worked at Goldman Sachs for 15 years when I came out. I knew almost everybody at the company. I'd worked with all the senior executives. So that was one thing. And I just wondered whether Goldman Sachs would hire openly transgender people right out of college. And we are hiring people now. We have interns in this class that are openly transgender. We have new hires that are openly transgender. So I think, the two sectors in the United States, I don't know how it is in Brazil, but the two sectors that are more advanced than the other sectors are financial services, the banking sector in particular, and the technology sector. So those two sectors seem to embrace diversity a little bit more than other sectors. And so there's a lot of people, there are a lot of transgender people that are out in the workplace. So there's a lot of role models out there. It's definitely possible. But as I said earlier, each situation is different. Each company's different. Each person's different. So again, find transgender people who have already done what you want to do and ask their advice. Explain to them what's unique about your situation, what you're worried about, and get good advice, and then make the best decision you can.
Great. That was actually the last question we had for you. We will be now taking questions from our audience. So if you are in the audience, you're more than welcome to be sending us questions. You can do that by accessing the link below this video or scanning the QR code that's on the screen. The first question is something that's also important. You can send the question in Portuguese if you don't feel comfortable by chance writing in English. So the first question is, in your opinion, what are the next steps for Goldman Sachs to become more diverse?
So you really have to take concrete steps. And I think our company is very focused on a couple of different things. So with women, we've publicly said that we intend to have our incoming analyst class. So analysts are people that are hired just right out of university. Our incoming analyst class be half male and half female. So we've publicly said that we've committed to that. And in our industry, one of the problems is we tend to have almost equal amounts of women and men early in their careers. And then when people get a little bit older, by the time they're 30 or so, we have a lot of women drop out. And so the percentage of men to women it changes. So one, it's important to set goals and hold yourself to those goals. We've said we wanted to have a more diverse board, and we've actually said that we will only work with, in the United States, we'll only work with companies that have diverse boards of directors, and they have to have women, they have to have Black people, they have to have Hispanics on the board, or we won't work with them. And then the other thing is you have to hold managers accountable. So managers have to know that they have to hire diverse people. And if their teams continue to be predominantly white men, that's not good. And their performance, they'll get a negative performance rating because they did not hire diverse people. So it's, setting goals and holding yourself accountable, and also holding the managers who hire people accountable for hiring diverse people.
Thank you so much. The next question was made by Marcelo. Thank you for saying your question, Marcelo. And I think it links really well with what you just answered. He asks, what is the role of a manager who is not part of a diverse group when leading a diverse team?
Yeah, so I think a manager who doesn't represent a diverse group but has a lot of diversity in his or her group needs to understand some of the concerns and feelings that diverse people have. And you know, it's interesting because I have a unique perspective because I thought I was part of kind of the majority white male group, and now I'm in a marginalized group, so I have kind of two different perspectives. And you know, my perspective now is that people, diverse people, what we really want is we just want to be accepted. um, and so, you know, accepting people, accepting their differences, and once you accept all those differences, you can create a very tight knit, cohesive group of people who work closely together. And you know, we say here that having diverse people in a group is beneficial because you know people have different points of view if you come from a diverse group. And if you have only white men in the group, that's not good. You're not going to get diverse views. So if a manager can accept the diversity in the group and unite everybody and bring them together and allow them to express their diverse opinions, then the group's going to be better. It's going to make better decisions. It's going to be more productive. People will be happier.
Thank you for sharing. The next question is that we see in Brazil a lot of cases of physical violence towards transgender people. Do you see it the same way in the United States? And is there any kind of support of this matter from the firm, from the bank?
Yeah, and you know, I think I'd heard that too. And unfortunately, if the politicians who lead a country are anti-trans and they make it clear, then people feel, you know, certain people feel that they can bully or hurt transgender people. So, you know, it's just very, very serious when politicians, and we had that again with the previous administration, with the Trump administration, who was very anti-trans, and it was a very bad environment for transgender people. And so at the federal government level, things are good now. We have good policies, but there are many states in the United States who have very bad policies for transgender people, and they're trying to pass laws that discriminate against transgender people. So, you know, corporations really need to step up, and they need to talk publicly about why that's bad. And you know, corporations and people who work at corporations need to support politicians that embrace diversity. And I think those are the responsibilities that corporations need to have.
The next question was made by Arthur. He asks, hearing your speech, I could notice that Goldman Sachs speak up about world events. Why do you think it's important for people to publicly share their opinion about something?
You mean at Goldman Sachs events?
I think he meant that Goldman Sachs is a bank that is really outspoken about their opinions on diverse matters. So I think he's questioning what is the importance of this, you think, in the world for companies to adopt?
Yeah, so I spend a lot of time here at Goldman Sachs. We all do. Everyone who works here works long hours. You know, I might spend 60 hours a week here, right? So it's very important to me to be proud of the place I work for. And so for the issues that matter to our employees, it's very important for us that Goldman Sachs speaks out on those issues. And that allows us to feel good about Goldman Sachs, not just as a place where we work, but a place we spend a lot of time, a place we spend a lot of time with other people. And that's what keeps people here. You know, if it's just a place that pays you a lot of money, people will leave and go to another place that pays a lot of money. But if it's a place that that values the opinions of its employees and speaks out about things that are important to its employees, then people will be proud to work here and they'll want to stay.
Makes sense. Next question we have here is from Victor. He says, you talk about the importance of diversity events. In your opinion, what us students can do to bring discussion to the university, but not just eventually?
Well, again, it comes down to speaking up about what's important to you. And just as we speak up at Goldman Sachs, like, you know, I talked about violence against Asians, Black Lives Matters, all these events that were happening last year. They're very important to our employees, and our employees would tell our CEO that Goldman Sachs is not doing enough to talk about these matters. So our employees speak up and they tell the management of our company what they need to do better. And I think students have always spoken up, right? So it's important at the university level as well to tell the leaders of your institution what's important to you and what they want you to speak up about and what they want you to do. Like if it's important to hold events, you know, an event like this hopefully educates you about transgender matters, and that's a good thing. So schools should be holding events like this to teach and give you ideas about what you can do to make your institution a better place.
Unfortunately, we are running out of time, so this is our last question.
Okay.
We know that there are still a lot of obstacles to success for minorities and women on Wall Street and on financial industry in general. So could you please tell us a challenge that you have faced since your transition and how did you deal with that? It could maybe be like your biggest challenge ever since.
Yeah, let me think. My biggest challenge. Well, you know, my biggest challenge was I talked about what's the most important thing for me. The most important thing for me, as a member of a minority group, is to feel like I'm accepted by people around me. So clearly, the reason why I didn't come out earlier was I was afraid that I wouldn't be accepted, right? And I still have that fear to some degree. So it's, you know, the biggest challenge I've had is just facing that fear. Facing that fear, and though I still had fear, doing what was right for me. And what was right for me was coming out and living as a person I truly am. And you know, because I did that, I'm a lot stronger person. I'm a lot more confident person. And it's like that with almost every challenge in life, right? If you face the challenge and you go through it, you're going to end up a stronger person. So that was the biggest challenge for me. And I think to some degree, I have that challenge every day. I still have it. It's not as big a challenge as it was before I came out at work, but you know, I have that challenge every day. When I see somebody looking at me in a strange way, you know, like I'm worried they're not going to accept me. So, you know, just facing that fear, but still being truthful to yourself, that's the most important thing.
Well, I just want to say thank you so much for sharing your story with us in such an authentic way. I think that inspires everyone to work hard, to embrace their true selves. So we're really grateful to have you here with us. So thank you, Maeve. And also thank you so much to Goldman Sachs for making this possible. We really appreciate it.
Well, thank you for having me. As I said, I would usually come down to our Sao Paulo office about once or twice a year. I haven't been down for a while. I can't wait, like everybody else, till COVID's over and we can start flying around again. And, you know, maybe I can see some of you next time I come down.
Absolutely. We would love to meet up somewhere in São Paulo, have a couple of beers together.
Sure.
So we can chat about life. It would be incredible. Thank you so much once again. I'll now get to Portuguese so we can talk a little bit with our audience. So, well, let's go. Então, pessoal, queria agradecer todo mundo por ter ficado aqui até agora. O evento está chegando ao fim. Como a Carol falou no começo do evento, queria relembrar a todos que as inscrições para o processo seletivo da Liga estão em aberto até o dia 2. Então, quem não se inscreveu ainda, dá tempo. Além disso, para quem estuda em faculdade pública particular, a gente está disponibilizando um certificado de horas complementares. Então, quem não conseguiu pegar o certificado ainda, o link está na descrição do vídeo. Confiram lá também. E queria agradecer mais uma vez todo mundo por ter ficado até aqui. A gente vai continuar fazendo eventos abertos. Então, continuem acompanhando nossas redes sociais, nosso canal no YouTube, que ainda tem muito por vir. E obrigado a todos. Boa noite.